Hello, everybody.
Hi.
We are back. It's been a couple of weeks since you've heard from us. I'm Savani Babu. I'm one of the co-founders of Hidden Compass.
I'm Sabine K. Bergman, and I am the other co-founder.
And we are joined today by one of the journalists who is in this current issue, Olivier Guiberteau.
Perfect.
Did I get
You got it right. Keep going. Let's go.
I thought I didn't, which was the reason for the face. For those of you who are not sitting in our rooms with us, we've just had a conversation with Olivier about wanting to pronounce his last name correctly. So hence the reaction there. But I got it right. Yes, so we're excited to talk to Olivier about his story and his career and other things. And so I'm going to start by introducing him. Olivier is a freelance journalist and a photographer who covers travel, sports, culture, and adventure. He's based in London. He's lived and worked in multiple countries around the world, and he wrote a fantastic story for us. So we're excited to chat about it.
Yes, and I'll start by asking a question about the story. It's about the ending of the story, but I'll phrase it hopefully in a way that doesn't ruin it for those of you who haven't read it yet. And you should, because it's fantastic. But the piece ends with this profound shift. The piece is about Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. And there is a change in you, Olivier, and the narrator by the end of the piece. And that change reverberates beyond the forest. And I've written my fair share of stories that end with a profound shift, with some sort of epiphany that remains confined to the story that I think is going to continue in my life in one way, and it doesn't, or it continues in a different way. So I have to ask, since it's been a little while since you wrote the piece, do you go back to the forest? Has this practice stayed with you? And if it hasn't, do you see yourself turning to it in other times of crisis?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I still go to the forest as much as I can. I will have to say that since I've finished, my mum hasn't been very well, so I haven't been able to go as much as I can, as much as I wanted to. But at the same time, I do find myself in the back of my mind thinking, well, that was beneficial then, so it makes sense that it would still be beneficial now. So I think sometimes it's easy to sort of think, well, that was done and I don't need to do that anymore. But probably now more than ever, it's something that I'm aware that I do need to go back to, and sort of need to keep reminding myself that, you know, it's not something you just do for 6 months. It's probably something I would want to do for the rest of my life.
Well, sorry to hear that.
About your mom, yes.
Mom, yeah.
But so glad that you have this practice now that you can turn to.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's for me, it's something that, yeah, I don't think I will ever not do it anymore. I think, you know, once I sort of saw the benefits of it, you know, whether I can always do it as much as I like is another matter. But yeah, it's something that I think I will do for the rest of my life. I think I've seen a good way of helping myself with things like this. So it just sort of makes sense to sort of, you know, to keep doing it. But I guess it's just one of those things that we always have to remind ourselves that we do need to keep doing good things for ourselves, even though we might not always have the time, or we might, you know, our minds might be a little bit elsewhere, you know, things like that.
Sure. Well, and your bio on the website ends with this sentiment. I'm going to read it because I don't want to get it wrong, but it mentions that your Hidden Compass piece on Shinrin-yoku is intended as the first in a series that aims to explore how we can address issues like mental health in more natural and holistic ways. And, you know, this isn't to say that there isn't room for traditional pharmaceutical methods and mental health treatment, but we also know that exposure to nature is beneficial to mental health. And so I guess my question is, what else are you envisioning for this series?
Wow, that's a very good question. And, you know, I think there's a lot of things out there that are sort of coming to the fore at the moment, things like meditation, things like breathing, even things like extreme, well, not necessarily extreme, physical activities, You know, I've recently done a 100-kilometer walk in one go, and so we did it overnight. Wow. In 28 hours, and it was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do mentally, and yet at the end of it I got such a feeling of accomplishment, and which led into about 2 or 3 weeks of really nice kind of peaceful calm. And this is something that I'm looking into, because there is another idea that originated in Japan. It's called a misogi, which is when you basically every now and again you push your body to do something that you're not even sure whether it can get there. But the idea is that you sort of, you know, once a year, twice a year, you sort of get your head down and you do something that is almost to you superhuman. And sometimes you do it, sometimes you fail, but the idea is that you keep coming back to that. And it's yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that, you know, I would like to explore a little bit more of. And just, you know, ideas from around the world, you know, how do other people deal with mental health issues? You know, I think sometimes if us living in the first world think we know that we think we know all of the answers, when in reality people have been addressing these things for thousands of years, perhaps in a better way than we are at the moment. So you know, I've got a lot of ideas about things I want to explore.
I love that superhuman, things that feel superhuman to us. And yeah, I think it really does connect to mental health in terms of getting into a new mindset of believing or pushing yourself to do things that you thought were impossible. It's incredible. I want to ask more generally about the things that you do. And, you know, you're both a photographer and a writer, and you cover several beats. What's your favorite thing about your job?
Very good question. I mean, photography has always been something that I've just always been attracted towards. As much as I've always loved writing, I think the idea of photographs and simply being out in nature and just being on an adventure and just photographing whatever I come across. You know, I don't necessarily want to photograph things in a studio or things that are set up. You know, I like real life. I like just being in the world, you know, and just seeing, you know, people that you pass or things that you see, you know, little kind of magic moments. So when I can work and do that, that's kind of my absolute favorite thing that I can do. It doesn't always work out like that, but that's, you know, that's the top.
Yeah, I hear you. As a photographer as well, that is, as much as I love writing, there's something about just being present in a place and capturing what you see.
Yeah. And there's something about, you know, when you're, as great as writing is, I'm always aware that I'm sitting behind a computer looking at a screen.
Yes.
And that's incredibly, you know, I love it. I love what I do and I love producing things. But at the same time, you know, the longer you do it, the worse you feel almost, you know. So so when you can be out in the real world and, you know, you've got a camera and you're just taking pictures of whatever takes your fancy, you know, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, definitely.
In defense of writing, though, I have to say that you do have those moments where you're in a place or you're in a scene or you're talking to people and you have your notebook and you have no screens involved. So I feel like as the one with least photographic experience in the group, I have to stand up for the writing.
No, I mean, with this particular story, you know, I remember there were points in the forest where I just sat down with my notebook, you know, and actual paper and pen and actually just wrote, you know, and that was quite amazing, you know, because I kind of sometimes think, well, I need to be at my desk and I need to be on my computer and I need to be focused. And well, actually, sometimes you can, especially with something like this, you can just go to the forest and just kind of write what, you know, what you're thinking about, what you see, and, you know, and that's, so yeah, I mean, writing is it's a labor of love, isn't it? It's wonderful at times, and at times it's maddening before, beyond anything I've ever experienced. So.
Yes.
Yes.
And I do have to admit that many of the breakthroughs I've had in writing are at a computer and not on the mountaintop or in the forest where the sunbeams are shining down. I'm looking at the notes and saying, what does it mean later?
Right. Right. Exactly. Well, one of the questions we like to ask folks is, what is the last book, article, or podcast that you recommended to someone? Because we've gotten some great recommendations from asking this question, so it's always a fun one.
Well, something that I'm talking to everybody about at the moment is a podcast that I listened to the other day. It was one of Joe Rogan's podcasts where he was talking to a guy who is trying to come up with a new way of addressing the homeless crisis in California.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, to me, it was just so eye-opening to sort of try to look at the problem in a very, very different way, and look at the processes that can hopefully lead people out of these issues, in terms of addiction and things like that. And I think it's something that I'm quite passionate about. I mean, living in London, it's a very, very big problem there, and it's only getting worse. So I did some work earlier in the year photographing homeless people and sort of speaking to them about their experience, and it was heart-wrenching. It was really, really difficult to hear. So listen to this podcast. It just made so much sense about how we can try to address it. And please don't ask me the name of the person, because I've just forgotten. But he's written a book called San Francisco, which is basically addressing this. Why is it so bad in California, and kind of the causes, but also like, how do we address it? Like, what can we do as a society to be proactive to sort of try to help the situation, rather than just throwing money at it, which is going on at the moment. So I'm telling everyone about that podcast because I think it's something that we all need to kind of get on board with, I think.
Yeah. And a very important issue, especially now after all that we've gone through the last couple of years.
Right.
Yeah.
So every story we publish has a fundraising campaign, for those who are watching and are not familiar with how we do things at Hidden Compass. And the proceeds of that campaign are split 50-50 between Hidden Compass and the contributor on top of their article pay. Olivier, what would you like to say to the people who have already contributed to your fundraising campaign?
Thank you.
That's a good answer.
It's a good answer.
It's the first time, I have to be honest, it's the first time that I've been involved in a sort of fundraising campaign with journalism, so it's very new to me. I guess I hope that, and as we talked about earlier, things about addressing mental health with other things like that, that's the sort of stories that I want to sort of, I want to tell. So if somebody is donating, I hope that I will be able to, repay that faith with a little bit, some more articles that might be able to help other people, or, whether specifically the people that help with the campaign or not. It would be nice to know that people believe in what I am sort of trying to do further on down the road.
Great. That's wonderful. That's a good thing to say.
Definitely a good answer. Well, with that, that's all we have for you, but we are grateful that you joined us this evening for you, this morning for us, and this afternoon for the people who are watching this when it goes live. So
hitting all the time zones. Yes,
exactly.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's watching. It's such a pleasure to do what we do. And I'm so excited that we get to introduce the incredible storytellers that we work with to you as readers, so that they are not this amorphous byline underneath the story title, but they're actual human beings doing incredible things. So
yes, so check out the story. Check out the story. We'll link it it'll be linked below, and contribute to the campaign. And we will see you next week.